Well, good morning again, everyone. And did anybody but me feel their anxiety level going up as he was answering those questions? I mean, what is it about a lie detector that makes us all feel like, and it's only a movie? I mean, what would happen if I told you we got our hands on one of those? And so we're going to, as you leave, just hook you up and ask you just a few random questions. People start, oh my goodness. And the premise of what we're going to talk about today is getting at that feeling, the feeling that I think we all shared as we watch that clip. Well, welcome again, and you're here, as you've already heard, for part 2 of a series in our message series called Unstuck. And Unstuck makes this assumption: stuck happens, right? You know what stuck feels like. And even if you weren't here last week, we covered a lot of ground, but it'll come naturally to you as I begin to explain where we came from. Because we all know what stuck feels like. This is our stuck board back here. And not just cars get stuck, but people get stuck. We get stuck in relationships and attitudes and beliefs. And there was a man that walked into human history, we talked about last week, who had this amazing ability to get people unstuck. And the New Testament is actually filled with stories of encounters that this man had with stuck people. Now, if you are a little skeptical about those stories, or maybe you feel like they don't relate to you because they happened a long time ago, we looked at a much more modern story, the story of someone who became known as Bill W., who was actually the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. And AA is one of the most successful, life-changing, unstuckness organizations that has ever been. Over the last 80 years, there have been thousands and thousands of people who have gotten unstuck from addiction based on the steps that Bill W. recorded, right? So Bill W. was stuck, and he records how having an encounter, a life-changing encounter with Jesus, got him unstuck. And he boiled it down to 12 steps. And that's the basis for this whole series of messages that we're doing. And so last week, if you weren't with us, we covered the first 3 steps. Step 1 was summarized this way: I can't. The actual step is we admitted we were powerless over our fatal attraction to do wrong, and our lives had become unmanageable. Now, as I say that, that can feel a little attacking or accusatory. But what I want you to know is when we say step 1, I can't, those things, my life has become unmanageable, this is an all skate. We're all actually in the same boat. Last week we used this little liturgy that said, and also with you, because I said, you all are crazy, messed up sinners. And everybody responded, and also with you, which was right. But I want to give you maybe a little more meat on those bones today, just before we move on, so that everyone in the room understands this is everyone. This is for all of us. It's why the first step starts with we. And so I came up with a few things that if I'm being honest, in times in my life, these will be things that are true about me. And so if you don't want me to feel like I'm the only one that struggles with any of this stuff, I would like for you to say, if you're willing, at the end of each one of these, and also with me, and also with me. So let's practice that, because I'm a little worried that I'll be the only one that's admitting things, during this part of the message. So let's practice, and also with me. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Very good. Okay. If I was being honest, sometimes I can be filled with pride. I can be arrogant and self-centered. I can find fault in others to make myself look better. I get stubborn and I demand my way. Oh, thank God. I can have real anger issues sometimes. I can be resentful. I can hold on to bitterness. I can say hurtful things without even trying or noticing. I can be passive aggressive. I thought so. I can get overwhelmed with worry sometimes. I can think of every bad scenario and very few good ones. I can worry about worrying. You can say it with a little more gusto. Some of you were like, this is too painful. One more. Can we do one more? Let's just do one more. I can have a hard time telling the truth all the time. I can exaggerate and spin so often that I forget where the truth actually lies. I can lie about things that nobody actually even cares about. Yeah. So this is what we said is we will manage and control and manage and control our relationships and our circumstances until they become unmanageable. And we said, this is actually then a place of hope. This stuckness is the place where we can finally decide, I'm not going to play God anymore in my life. And until that happens, sometimes we'll never really find God because we're just managing and controlling. When it becomes unmanageable finally in some area, that's our greatest chance to actually find God. John Ortberg tells a story about a little preschool class in one of the churches that he was a pastor in, and maybe you've seen these plays where the little kindergartners take on the roles of creation, right? So some of them are creepy crawly things, and some of them are swimmy things, and some of them are trees. But one kid, this kid named Jonathan, was asked to play the role of God. And so they had a ladder over on the side of the room, and Jonathan was to climb up the ladder, and at the right time, he was supposed to take the flashlight, and he was supposed to click it on and say, "Let there be light." And he just shine it on all the squirmy things and the trees and all of that. And so they were coming up to the day where all the parents would come and see the little play and everything like that. And the teacher, as they were all preparing, there's a little tug on her on her jacket, and it was Jonathan. And little Jonathan said, and he looked up with his kindergarten eyes. He's kind of, going like this. And he said, I'm sorry. You're going to have to find somebody else. I'm just feeling too crazy to be God today. And I thought, that's the beginning of recovery. That's the beginning of transformation, is when you and I go, I'm just too crazy to play this role anymore. It has become unmanageable for me. So step one was I can't. Step two was God can. That we came to believe in a power greater than ourselves that could restore us to sanity. And herein lies the hope of recovery, the hope of spiritual transformation. This is the hope of the gospel, right? And in 2 Corinthians 3:17, we read this, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. This is where the hope comes from. So step one, I can't. Step two, God can. And then step three we covered was an action step. It's the step of I'll let him. I will let God have the things that I can't control and manage anymore in my life. I will surrender to him. I will let go of these things. And we said that doesn't come naturally to us, that this posture is not naturally what we default to. This is the action of step three. So steps 1, 2, and 3, I can't, God can, I'll let him. Which brings us to steps 4 and 5 that we've mentioned already this morning. Step 4, we resolve to make a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And step 5, we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to one other human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Step 4 and step 5. And this is where we stop pretending that our lives are controllable and manageable, or that somehow miraculously they became so after step 3, right? So let's just get this straight, that all of that change doesn't happen when you go like this. That is a necessary step, but that's step 3 in the transformation process, right? And so this is where we stop being theoretical about our stuff and using terms like everybody's got their issues and, well, I know I'm not perfect, which sound transparent and revealing but are actually evasive because we're not using real words. So steps 4 and 5 are when we start calling things what they are. We start saying words like pride and passivity and lying and hatred, jealousy, self-pity, and they're called what they are. In effect, what we're doing is we're coming back in this inventory stage, and we're peeling back. We're saying, underneath here, there's some stuff, and I need to peel this back. I need to take a look and say, what's underneath this? And that's a scary step, but the two words that are used by AA here, I think are so helpful. They say, we are going to make a searching and fearless moral inventory. And you know what I love about those two words? We are neither. Come on. We are neither searching nor fearless most of the time in our lives, right? Searching would mean I desperately want to know the truth. And sometimes my actions and yours say, I desperately do not want to know the truth. That even though Jesus says the truth will set you free, Jack Nicholson says you can't handle the truth, and sometimes I go with Jack over Jesus, right? I'm not searching most of the time. And fearless, come on. Fearless would mean I'm just ripping stuff back. I don't care what's underneath there, and I don't care who knows it. Unless that somehow is a coping mechanism for something else that's even farther underneath. I don't do that. And most people I know don't do that. So these words to me are so telling because they are things that we are not. They making a searching and fearless moral inventory is sometimes the farthest thing from what I would tend to do on my own. And Jesus, he would help people in many ways to do this. He was forever asking questions that led people in this direction. Remember the woman at the well where Jesus came and after some bit of conversation, he said, hey, go get your husband. And remember her response was, I don't have one. And he's like, bingo, you've had 5 and the guy you're living with now is not him. What's happening? So let's just rip that level off. And let's talk about what's really going on here. What are you looking for in this relationship that you can't find in it? So, or sometimes Jesus would just make a statement that would show that he knew what was going on better than the people that he was talking to knew what was going on underneath their lives. There was a group of religious leaders at one point, and they looked really good. They wouldn't even maybe have these words. They'd have better words, praying and, religious leader on the outside. And he said, if we pull this back, you know what's inside you? Whitewashed tombs. There's all this death and decay under there, and you're oblivious to it. See, here's what Jesus knew. He knew we would need help. We would need help in this step, in these 2 steps of doing a searching and fearless moral inventory. Why? Because we're not searching and we're not fearless most of the time. And to boot, our hearts are deceitful. In Jeremiah 17, it says, the heart is deceitful above all things. Who can know it? So Jesus knows it. And that's why he knew that we would need help if we were going to take steps 4 and 5. So this is the place in the message where I will stop and I will invite you to ask God to help you in these 2 steps. But I got to warn you before you do. This invitation comes with a warning label that asking God to help will make it better and worse for you. And it'll be worse before it's better. And I think you'll see what that means when we look at a description, an example of someone who invited God to help them make a searching and fearless moral inventory. It's in the Psalms. In the Old Testament, there's 150 of these different Psalms, and this one is a Psalm of David. David was a king of Israel and represented God's people. And David was, like a lot of leaders in the Bible, a mixed bag. It's kind of why I like the stories in the Bible, because they don't make up perfect people that I have nothing in common with. They tell the stories of real people who are sometimes a hot mess, of whom I have a lot in common with. And that's David. David's a great leader, passionate, man after God's own heart is actually one way that he's described. And then he is a loose cannon on a lot of other levels. And this is, Psalm 139, is an invitation given by David for God to help him make a searching and fearless moral inventory of his life. Psalms is right in the middle of the Bible, if you have a paper one, or if you have a little scrolly one that's right in the middle there, if you want to follow along. We'll come back to this, but it ends this way. It ends with David saying, "Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there's any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." What's he doing? He's saying, I'm about to pull some tape here. I need help. I need your help, God. And in this demonstration, I think we're going to find some things that we need in order to do our own searching and fearless moral inventory. I think we'll find a critical shift that David makes that we have to make if we're going to do this inventory. I think we find an honest reflection, and it is gut level honest, and we need to pay attention to it. That leads to this transforming reality that would allow every one of us to do this inventory in a transformative way for ourselves. So let's look at those things. It starts with this critical shift. So just before the prayer that I just read you, which are the last two verses in the whole psalm, if we started in verse 19, here's what you would read. Verse 19 starts this way. "If only you, God, would slay the wicked. Away from me, you who are bloodthirsty. They speak of you with evil intent. Your adversaries misuse your name. Do I not hate them who hate you, Lord, and abhor those who are in rebellion against you? I have nothing but hatred for them. I count them my enemies." Arr. Did you see it? Here's what he says. If only you, God, would. Oh, we start a lot of prayers and thoughts, and those ones that are in the middle that are kind of prayers and kind of thoughts, and sometimes it's hard to tell. If only, you just fill in your blank. If only you, God, was, and almost every time we're focused on something out there. See, David, like us, is an expert at identifying all of the external problems that are causing his stuckness. He's going, look at those people. They're bloodthirsty men. And guess what? He was right. Look at those men. They abhor your commands. And guess what? He was right. He was right about every one of those. And so could we be. I mean, we can tend to be really clear on all the external factors that get me stuck. It's my parents that gave me this attitude. That's where that came from. I can go down the list. It's my finances that has these habits tangled around me. It's my boss. It's my spouse. And guess what? You might be accurate, but that will not get you unstuck. The critical shift that David makes, watch it. He goes through this list of all these external things that are happening, and then verse 23. Look at it with me. Search me, God. Know my heart. Test me. Know my anxious thoughts. See if there's any offensive way in me, and lead me to the way everlasting. This is a critical shift and a brave prayer, and the beginning of this searching and fearless moral inventory. We need to make that shift. But it comes, did you see? So now I've covered the last verses of the psalm, and there's the whole first part that we haven't dealt with yet. I did that on purpose because I want you to see where we're going, because what it takes to get there is sometimes really difficult. What it takes to get there is this honest reflection that David shows us. He demonstrates this honest reflection of God and of himself. And it's broken up into three different parts. His attributes of God that he reflects on are broken up into verses 1 to 6. They're all about how much God knows. Let me read it to you. You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You discern my going out and my lying down. You're familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely, Lord. You hem me in behind and before you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. The first thing that David reflects on, this honest reflection of God, is God knows everything about me. Did you see what he says? He goes, you know my thoughts. Now, think about that. Somebody already knows what you're thinking. The things that you wish nobody would know. The things that if I said, we have this new contraption. It's not a lie detector. It's a thought detector. And we're just going to project yours up on the screen. God knows. He already has seen the movie. He sees all of them. I love this one. It says, before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely. Like that thing that you're about to say, God already knows whether you're going to say it or not. He knows what tone of voice you're going to use when you say it. God knows. And the depth in which he knows, David is pretty clear on. God knows. He sees. And then he goes on in verses 7 to 12, and he says, and not only does God know, not only is he omniscient, he is omnipresent. He's always around. In verses 7 to 12, look at what it says. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to heavens, you're there. If I make my bed in the depths, you're there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me and the light become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. He says, when I reflect on it, God not only knows everything, he's always present. There's never a time in my life where God's not present. And then he talks about, in the last section, he reflects on the power of God. And he reads, he says in verses 13 to 18, for you created my inmost being. What's that? That's like the inside of you, your psyche, your identity. God made that, David says. And I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Oh, I skipped one. You knit me together in my mother's womb. My frame was not hidden from you. So, in other words, my outsides and my insides rely on your power, God. When I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. My outsides, my insides, every second of my life is held in the power of God. Not 1 second outside of his power and presence. So maybe I would summarize it this way. David starts this reflection and he says, God knows, God sees everything. But it's interesting. David doesn't just describe the omniscience, the omnipotence of God, the attributes of God. Do you see what else is included? He describes how they make him feel, and this is so important. He doesn't just say God's all that. He says, and in light of that, this is how I feel. Do you see it? It starts in verses 6 and 7, where he says, this is too wonderful for me. That word could be translated overwhelming to me. This is a little overwhelming to think that you know all of that. Where can I go to get away? In verse 11, I'm trying to hide. Now, why is someone talking about hiding and fleeing from this God that David just described? Because how intimidating is it that someone could know everything and you don't get to filter it at all? That's unnerving. And you can never get away from them? Yeah, we do an awful lot of image management, excuse me, with one another. We manage what people see and hear. And now all of a sudden David's saying, and none of that is available with God? God sees and God knows? How threatening is that? We go to great lengths to protect these things and to understand we're worried about how people will see us. Did your mom ever tell you to make sure you had clean underwear on before you left? You know, I never really did any thinking about that care. In other words, my mom wouldn't say, hey, those things don't match, or, maybe you should wear something different. Today you've worn that sweatshirt 19 days in a row or something like that. She would say, did you change your underwear? And that the underwear was clean was her chief concern. And you know why, right? Because you might get into an accident, which I never really thought about at the time, but is a bizarre concern. So imagine I do get into an accident, God forbid, and they haul me into, the emergency room, and they say, well, this one looks bad. Better check his underwear to see what kind of mother he's got. But this idea of, if this would happen, this might reflect badly on me. So I'm going to check and make sure. He must have a bad mom. Look, he's got, that's kind of silly. But I use a silly example because there are so many unsilly ones that just feel like if I didn't have that control about what people know about me, I might just fall apart. And David is saying God has that kind of access. Can anything be more threatening than this? That God knows every single thing about you. Oh, and by the way, he's perfect. But by the way, he's got nothing wrong with him. What could be more threatening than that? We can spend an awful lot of time hiding and fleeing from God. And David is coming to grips with that. It's happened for a long, long time. Started with the Garden of Eden, right? Hiding and fleeing from God. But it needs to stop now. It can stop now. And it will lead us, after this honest reflection, to a place where this searching and fearless moral inventory can occur. What's worse, by the way, before we turn the page, what's worse than being seen and known? Not being ever seen or known. Right? Because if you're never known, you can never be loved. You know that's true. That if somebody professes their love for you and you know that they don't know half the things about you, you temper that. You go, that's nice, but if you ever really knew, you probably wouldn't love anymore. What's worse than being seen and known is being not seen and never known, of being invisible. And so we have this dilemma, right? The dilemma is, I desperately want to be known and loved, and I am desperately afraid of being known and loved. And the truth is, that's our dilemma. The truth is, God already knows and has already decided to love. And it invites us into this transforming reality. Because this is the third piece. That David describes this transforming reality, that the one who sees and the one who knows is someone who has already loved. That he's not going to use that against you to power up. As a matter of fact, he gave up power in order to love you. You see, God demonstrates this transforming reality is that Jesus was stripped and humiliated so you don't have to be. So that when you and I start to pull some tape back, we don't have to worry, will that make me unlovable now? We can do it. We can be searching, fearless. Why? Only because of the demonstrated love of our Heavenly Father. It's the only way you're going to make this inventory. It's the only way I'm going to make it. And so, here at the end this morning, I'm going to invite you to this searching and fearless moral inventory. As a matter of fact, right now, I'm going to ask our ushers to come and to hand out a little card to everyone in the sanctuary this morning. And so if you would pass those down the rows and take them. they're going to be a guide for us. Can't do the whole thing this morning, but we're going to invite you to take a step into this process. Only because we have now been given this transforming reality of the demonstrated love of God, which protects us from these two dead-end extremes, from the extreme dead end of despair, self-despair, which comes when I couldn't bear to understand what's underneath here. That if I don't have to worry that I'm going to be crushed under the weight of the truth that's what's here, because God already knows, then I can begin to pull some tape. I can begin to say, let's really see that one's really on there. I'll go to this one. I can pull it, because despair is not a fear anymore, because I'm already loved and God already knows what's there. And Jesus says you don't need to do this alone. When you begin to pull back the tape, he's already there. He's already there waiting. And now that we know the love of God demonstrated on the cross, we're prevented, we're not going to hit the dead end of self-righteousness that says, I'm offended that you would even think that there's anything under there. And also with me. And so knowing and preparing in this way allows us to really be fearless and searching in our moral inventory. And the moral inventory is a fact-finding, fact-facing process. It searches for causes and attitudes and thoughts and beliefs and fears that keep us stuck. It peels back the tape and allows us to get at the root of what's really keeping us stuck. Because all of these are just symptoms, right? There's deeper work, and Jesus says you don't have to do it alone. Now, on your card that you have, there are 4 categories with questions under each one of them. And these are straight from the AA playbook of dealing with our stuff, our inventory around these headings. It starts with people that you hold resent for. And then it moves to things that you're afraid of. And then it moves to a category of people that you have harmed. And then finally, it reveals the area of sexual encounters in our lives. And in every one of them, there's some work we can do. And we want to provide an opportunity right here at the end of the service to just, in the quietness of this moment between you and God, to start the process. It'll, if you enter into it, it will be probably a lengthy process, but we can start today. And so I'm going to pray that God would meet us as we do. Let's pray. Father, thank you for the reality of transformation that is not hocus pocus or poof, I'm different. I would sign up for that every time. But thank you for the picture and the truth of how change actually happens. Because we do want to. And so would you meet us in this vulnerable moment where it might feel like there's something deeper that I'm ready to see? Would you meet us here and demonstrate your love so that we could not get stuck on this step, that we could move forward? We pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.